Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Cybersmart Conversations with Harsha. I'm so delighted to be joined today by Vice President, Energy, Environment and Advocacy at BOMA Toronto, Bala Yanam. Bala has over 20 years of experience in the energy, commercial real estate, and manufacturing sectors, with the key focus on building performance and climate solutions. Thank you for joining, Bala. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Asha. Thanks for inviting me to be part of your podcast.
It's a pleasure. Today's podcast is about sustainability and building performance. But before we begin, this is one question I ask all my guests. Tell us about your career path.
Sure. So my background is industrial engineering. My career started in the food manufacturing sector, then moved to the energy sector, mainly oil and gas, and then to the electricity distribution side. Then I took a turn and then I moved back to manufacturing. And then this is mainly focusing on the industrial processes for a number of years before I joined the commercial real estate with BOMA with a focus on building performance and built environment. Even though my career has been, kind of a moving between energy and manufacturing sector, the process improvement, energy efficiency, and efficiency in general and environment, they all have been a common theme throughout my career. And a unique attribute of the commercial real estate industry is that it is truly a multidisciplinary field. So I just thought maybe I'll put a plug in. So those who are in high schools and universities exploring career options, or those who are just simply looking for a career change, should definitely consider the commercial real estate because it truly does provide a very wide exposure and a career path in various areas.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. And thank you for sharing your career journey. And this is what we call a curvy path.
That's right.
Yeah. But before we dive in building performance, I would like to ask this one question that often comes to my mind when I hear this word resilience. Because, like, whenever and wherever we see a natural disaster, sustainability and building resilience becomes the topic of conversation. So, can you shed some light on what is the difference between sustainability and building resilience?
So maybe I will tackle the sustainability first. I know it's a word that's overused in many cases, but I see that sustainability as a broad objective that focuses on buildings' overall ability to provide a comfortable, healthy, safe, and productive environment over life of its existence, and through that process have the minimum or low impact on environment. So that is kind of the sustainability. I guess could be a classical definition. And the term resilience. Now, that is again, it's one of those terms where people usually don't understand exactly what resilience mean, apart from what we know as kind of your textbook definition of what resilience is. So the term resilience within the building context is often incorrectly interchanged with other terms such as mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. So maybe I can answer just by differentiating those terms, and then I come back to that. So the mitigation is about the slowing of the rate of risk, let's say in case of climate change. The adaptation, on the other hand, is about learning to live with or cope with the impacts of such risk. Let's say again, climate change would be a good example. And the resilience is about withstanding and overcoming the effects of the risk. So it's again, if we're going to talk about climate change, is how do we respond? How do we recover from an event? So as it relates to building, we all accept that buildings exist to serve various purposes depending on the asset type. So if a building cannot fulfill its purpose because of certain shock to its system, let's say it could be climate related, it could be something that's of our own creation, something else, then the building is not operating as it's designed. So what does that mean? That means we now have to shift the focus or the definition of resilience to more operations focused, and we call it operational resilience. And then operational resilience is the ability of building operations to recover and bounce back to normal operations or better following an extreme shock to the operation. So that's what the resilience is.
Yes, and this is really
Yeah,
helpful. We often and you explain this nicely because we often confuse between what is resilience and then adaptation. And
exactly. Yes.
then we use this interchangeably with mitigation.
Mhm.
Yes.
And while we're on that topic, I would also like to kind of raise the distinction between emergency response plan and a resilience plan, because again, this is two terms are often treated as synonymous, but it's in fact it's incorrect to do that, because the general goal of an emergency response plan is health and safety, while the goal of a resilience plan is business continuity. So emergency response plan often deals with procedures, protocols, and actions that are taken immediately after an event, whereas the resilience plan focuses on maintaining and restoring businesses' operations. So even though one impact the other, they're clearly two different camps of thinking.
Yeah. And this is all what we can say is tied to how we construct buildings, or how we use them, or where they are located.
Mhm.
So we know reducing carbon emissions is one way to slow climate change, but then there are bigger polluters. So how do buildings contribute to climate change?
So buildings and their construction together account for about 35% of global energy use and about 40% of energy-related carbon dioxide emissions annually. And this is according to reports published by United Nations Environment Program, or commonly known as UNEP. In North America, residential and commercial buildings account for about 40% of consumption, and buildings operations, this is clearly commercial, account for about 30% of emission annually. Now, but there is another side to this. Maybe before I get to that side, we can look at some of the other contributing factors of emission from building operations. And let me say that we need to fundamentally change how we define performance to fully understand the impact of building. So normally, when we talk about performance, we gravitate towards energy efficiency. And that's rightfully so, because about a third of our operating budget is spent on energy. So that's our natural inclination to go towards energy efficiency. But we need to expand that definition to also include water, waste, and business operations, and the emissions from these aspect of operations. So the total emission from building could actually be a lot more than 30%,
Okay.
which is a significant portion.
Yeah, yeah. And you've explained the cause, and like, what kind of solutions do we need to mitigate? Because the building sector has the potential for delivering a significant and cost-effective emission reductions. And we have proven policies, we have technologies, and we have the knowledge base. So what are some of the ways buildings can reduce carbon emissions?
I mean, we can tackle this from a private side and then kind of from a public side. I think from a public perspective, I think we need more. First of all, I think we need to decouple climate change and politics. That's one of my pet peeves. I think very often it becomes highly politically charged conversation. I don't think it should be. And I think it's actually prevents us from moving forward in tackling this issue. And we are not limited by technology. I think technologies exist right now that can help us get to where we want to be in terms of our 2030 target or 2050 target. But it's a case of public policies and then programs to help us get there, and adoption of technologies. Now, purely looking from a existing building perspective, if you can tackle all the performance criteria that I mentioned earlier, I mean, that's energy, water, and waste, and have internal policies in place to continuously improve those areas, including integration of renewable energy where possible, we can gradually decarbonize buildings. And as I always say, I like to take a more of a practical approach to decarbonization, because it's not something that it's decarbonization or net zero buildings and things like that. It's not. It's a journey. It's a journey and it's a transition. It's not a kind of a switch. So we need to take more pragmatic approach to this. For new construction, I would say, the best way to do that is to consider the embodied carbon and the operational emissions as part of the life cycle analysis of the building, so that we build it right, and build it right for both from a material perspective as also from operations in mind. Again, usually there's a disconnect between design, construct, and operations. So I would say the best way to do is take more of an integrated approach and build it with operations in mind, so that when we get to that stage, we operate the building that we originally wanted to be designed, as opposed to designing something and then having to retrofit things to get to the state that we want.
And this is also what building certifications when it comes to operational. So because we hear there are so many certifications, but then what is the role of a building certification in advancing sustainability and climate actions?
The role of building certification, I think they do have a role if they are used properly. I think that's the key, because if the objective is to get a plaque on the wall, then it becomes more of a points chasing game. How do I go from one level to the next by achieving the points that I need? So now I go out and look for those areas where I can increase my points, because at the end of the day, those certifications are based on cumulative points. So you could be doing not so great on energy side, but then you have some other side that where you were doing extremely well, and then you can make points. And then you might say, oh yeah, you know what, I'm only 2 points below from going from, let's say, go from silver to gold. So then my next question is to my consultant would be, okay, how do I find those 2 points, right? And then we say, oh yeah, you can put a bench there, you can put a bicycle rack here. So well, then the question is, okay, then you get to gold, let's say. Then you have to ask yourself, did putting a bench and a bicycle rack, did that actually change my performance? Did I really go from a silver state to a gold? No, we haven't. We just simply window dressed. So I think it's important, when people pursuing building certification, they focus on their day-to-day operation and actually stay true to what's in those certification and make sure that those things are followed on a daily basis, as opposed to focusing on, like I said, the plaque on the wall, and only come as every 3 years or 5 years when it comes time for recertification, we kind of go through the checklist again. Yep. And there you go. We put a check mark on every one of them. Therefore, now we can renew. So, so it comes back to the subscriber of this certification program to make sure that they follow what's in the program.
Yeah, and this is really helpful to understand, because we hear there are building certifications and the buildings go for these certifications, but then you explain there's a whole process that is involved and how you achieve that, which was really helpful. So before we sign off, this one question, because we now hear net zero energy building, and to explain in a simple concept, it's like one which produces as much energy as it uses over the course of a year, so which is by definition. And currently there are only small number of highly efficient buildings that meet this criteria of what we call net zero. So what is the path to the net zero building?
So I immediately see a flaw in the definition as it relates to emission reduction. The reason is, just because the building produces as much as energy that it uses doesn't mean that building is using the energy efficiently.
Okay.
So you can have an inefficient building, highly inefficient building, but have that has integrated renewable, just to show that yes, our net energy is zero. So I think we need to kind of put in a layer of carbon zero to it. So it's, yes, net zero, I would say step one, but carbon zero should be step two. But as I mentioned before, I think we need to take more of a pragmatic approach. Given that existing buildings constitute about, I would say, over 90% of the building stock, converting those buildings to net zero energy or carbon is not easy. It's very cost prohibitive. Someone might argue, well, you know what, energy is, but let's say in Ontario and in Canada, heating is a major factor. Oh, we just get rid of gas and that will decarbonize our buildings. Yeah, that math works, yes. But then the practicality is that we can't do that. As I said, the transition to net zero carbon or energy is a journey. It's a transition. So we need to make sure, what can we do today to minimize our emission? That means, doing a proper audit, do a retro commissioning where needed, to identify those opportunities and tweak our buildings to its optimum performance. Then we look at retrofit, and then we have policies in place to continuously drive down emission. And there will come a point where you've addressed everything. There's still a certain portion that's still being accounted. Well, it's accounted for, but you can't do anything about it. Well, that's when you can do offsets. But do an offset where it goes through scope 3 audit as opposed to scope 1, and make sure the offsetting through some serialized process, so that what you're buying into or offsetting with is preserved and is not resold. So there are a lot of, so you need to work with an accredited carbon accounting firm to make sure that your excess carbon are offset properly. So it is a path, and it is, like I said, it's a process, but you can't just, go to bed, high carbon emitter, and then wake up saying, oh, well, I'm net zero, in the morning. So anyway, that's my take on this.
Yeah, I agree. And this was really helpful, because it's a path, it's a journey that has to be planned and that has to be taken. So thank you, Bala. Thank you for sharing those insights. And I'm sure many of my concepts, or what I call it, my misconceptions regarding sustainability, are clear today. And I'm sure our audience will also benefit from these practical insights that you've shared regarding building performance, sustainability. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harsha. And again, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Take care.